Hi, I'm Carly of Gnarly Carly Gaming, and today I'm going to be talking about my recent trip to San Antonio to see my friend Mackenzie for her birthday, and I'm going to review all 22 of the games that we played while I was there. So I actually met Mackenzie through Gnarly Carly shenanigans. She essentially saw that I posted that I lived in Maryland. She wasn't exactly sure where, but she messaged me to say that she was also in Maryland, and if I ever wanted to come through and game with her and her husband, they'd be delighted to have me. And I did not take her up on that for months and months, partly because my life was hectic and busy. Gnarly Carly has exploded in a lot of different directions, but also because you just don't prioritize people you don't necessarily know yet. So when your life's hectic, you're trying to make time for all your people. New people are just a secondary concern. And I regret it immensely because when we eventually did meet, it was just like gaming soulmate, friendship fireworks, all of it. And I was heartbroken because right after we finally got to know each other, her and Sebastian, her husband, moved to Texas with their family. And so I haven't really seen them. But we were eagerly awaiting PAX Unplugged this year, which is a convention at around December, to see each other. And I got really sick. So she got to hang out with my mom without me when they played games together. But I didn't get to see them, and it was sad for me and sad for Mackenzie. So Mackenzie decided for her birthday, what she wanted for a gift was for me to come and be there with her and spend about a week playing together. So we had 5 days, basically 4 full days and 2 half days on the end. So 6 technically, but really 5 core days of being together. And we played an inordinate amount of games. It was pretty much gaming. We went out one night, we celebrated birthday, did a couple other things, but really we played 22 games. Technically 20 different titles, but 22 gameplays happened, and I'm going to talk about all of them and the 20 different games I'll kind of give a synopsis of and my review of as I discuss the days we had. Okay, so here we go. Day number 1 was mostly a travel day. It was one of those half days because I spent the bulk of the day just getting to Texas. There's no direct flight from the DC area, which is relatively where I am, to San Antonio. So I popped up to St. Louis and then back down. And because I didn't have to get off my plane when I got into St. Louis, they just added more people and then we shot off, I was super hungry because I did not plan well for that. And so the first thing we did is we actually stopped at Whataburger, which is a very Texas thing that I've never done. And it's fast food. It's better fast food than most fast food. It's still fast food, but I can check mark off that Texas thing. And then we settled in at home and were ready to play some games. Sebastian and Mackenzie had their friend Allison over, and Sebastian's mom was there to basically watch their daughter so that we could just get down to some gaming for a couple days. And so what we kicked it off with was actually a game that we had played together in Maryland, so it was kind of like a homecoming to the table for all of us. We played Ark Nova, which if you've seen any of my other videos recently, Ark Nova was one of my top games of the year. It's a game that excites me so much. It's basically Zoo Tycoon, the board game. You have your own little zoo and you have to build enclosures and fill animals in them, and you're trying to basically increase what I call your woo points, what they call appeal, which is just the hype of your zoo, and it gets you more money, helps you build up, those kind of things, mixed with your conservation points, which is your good doing for the world. And together, that is your score, is the positive difference between the two. It is just stinking lovely. It's compared a lot to Terraforming Mars in terms of the card systems and needing certain tags and requirements to get certain cards. But it builds up super nicely. There's only 5 actions in the whole game, and it's just a flow of all of them. Super organic, natural, lovely thematic. I adore it. Great game. So post-dinner and post-Ark Nova, it was getting late and Allison was going to have to get home to her puppies, so we wanted to play one other game that wasn't too long, no more than an hour or so before she had to leave. And so we chose to play City Builder. I decided to get City Builder. So City Builder, it's right here. I also have Ark Nova. I don't have all the games we played, but I also have Ark Nova. But this one I wanted to showcase. It's one that I've never showcased on the channel before. And it's a tile laying game. You're basically building your own city. I would compare it a lot to Carcassonne in terms of how it feels to like build a city section. When you complete a city in Carcassonne, you get points. In this one, you're completing your own little cities in your own little world. But the types of buildings and structures within those cities will trigger ripple effects of acquiring different structures from different places. It then has a sort of between two cities element, which is the fact that you're vying for structures between your two opponents. And you'll get points for going through them more, but also if they go through them faster than you might be blocked out of certain structures. That is a very fast way of saying that you're taking tiles, building up a city, and trying to basically compete with the person on your left and right throughout. I think it's at home in the tile laying that I know. I didn't think it was a fully revolutionary thing, but I think it has a nice bite to it. I think as someone who's played Carcassonne to death, still love it, but played it to death, I think this is a nice step up for me. And I like the level of player interaction that exists between people on your right and left competing for structures, while my board is mine and mine alone and can't truly be messed with in a big way. After Allison left, I started to hit my own personal wall. I was in East Coast time and set back an hour, so while they were still doing relatively okay for a late night, my body was starting to shut down from just Whataburger sitting in it and also travel and just weak exhaustion. And so we played something that we had all played before. I needed a little bit of recap because I didn't have my own copy myself, but we played Bunny Kingdom as our third game of the trip. And I stinking love Bunny Kingdom. I forget how much I love Bunny Kingdom because I don't have Bunny Kingdom, but every single time I've played it, it's just been utterly delightful. Essentially, in the game, you are building up this beautiful little bunny fiefdom by acquiring little sections of the map. Like a battleship board, it's set off in grid lines, so you'll have A4, for instance, and I can acquire, if I draft the card for A4, that piece of land is my own. A bunny will go on it. In every region where you have bunnies, so independent sections of adjacent bunnies, you'll score based on the fortresses there, all of their towers, multiplied by how many resources are there. So you're trying to basically make clusters that are resource abundant, but also mighty and strong with your bunnies. And it's stinking lovely. You have this kind of push and pull of what I want for my fiefdom versus what I do not want to pass off to you for yours. And there's other bonus objectives that can give you things like a boost for having 7 areas of the board that produce fish, for instance. And so you're just trying to amass the best bunny land that you can. And it's just so charming. And we all knew it, and it was just a perfect way to end it all. We actually we also played with the expansion, which adds a Bunny Kingdom in the Sky element that was just kind of charming and lovely as well. I had not played with it before. It adds a whole bunch of resources, but overall feels the same. The one big thing it did was really boost all of our scores. I lost by a mile, but it was a much bigger mile than it normally would be. And after that, we decided to call it for the first night. We knew we had about 5 more days ahead of us of games and going out and shenanigans for Mackenzie's birthday, and so we were content with our starter 3. I crashed, and when we woke up the next day, basically Mackenzie and I immediately started playing games again over coffee together. There are so many wonderful 2-player games that are designed specifically as 2-player games that are just kind of light and lovely experiences. They're not as meaty or complex as something like Arc Nova, but they're that perfect I'm starting my morning with coffee and you kind of game, and we played 2 of those. The first one we played, I had not played yet. Mackenzie taught me, and it's called Aqualin, I don't know, however you want to say it, but it's a cute little puzzly game where one player owns colors and one player owns patterns, and you're trying to get big groups of either colors or patterns together, and I say colors because I played colors and she played patterns, with all these different aquatic little critters of different colors and patterns. And so there'd be like a purple starfish, and so I'm trying to get all of the purple things together, whether it's a starfish or a sea turtle, and she's trying to get all the starfish together and all the sea turtle together. And what you can do is on your turn you get to play something, but you can also move another piece orthogonally as long as it doesn't hit up against something and stop. And so it's this tug of war the whole game to try to maximize your clusters. And we dead even tied, and there was no tiebreaker. And that was probably the least satisfying end to a game that I had. But I really liked it. It was another really cool little puzzly 2-player game that I hadn't been introduced to yet. The second game we played that morning was Jaipur. And in this game, we are all merchants, and you're competing to be the best merchant. It is best 2 out of 3 in rounds. If the first 2 rounds end it, woo, but you're trying to get the most money throughout it. You're basically trying to acquire goods and then sell them for the best prices. The first to sell of any kind of goods when they're high in demand receive more money typically, besides some of the more exclusive things like silver that maintains its value throughout. And essentially on your turn, you're either taking one up to a hand of 7. You can exchange any number of cards in your hand for any of the available. Or you can take all of the camels. And camels don't take space in your hand, but they can allow you to basically sweep and replace cards when you're doing that exchange. And so once you've acquired things through all those different actions, you can also take an action instead of taking or exchanging to sell. Selling to try to get the most points. If you sell items in bulk, you also get bonuses. So if you sell in 3 or more, there's different stacks of extra money you'll get for selling in bulk. And once the deck is done or resources are depleted, you score that round. Somebody gets an extra point for having those camels at the end, well, extra 5. And then really it just comes down to money. And I believe Mackenzie smoked me there too, but it was a close game, at least for one round. But that one's just a lovely little 2-player that takes almost no time to learn, but can fit in a little purse, and it's perfect. It actually ends up being one of my airport games very, very often, just because of how convenient it is to throw in a bag and how it works so well with 2 with limited space. But that was just our coffee and warm-up games, and we were really excited to get some more meatier games to the table. That's why we wanted all of this time together, is to really play those bigger games that we've been craving. Before I arrived, we actually made a list of a bunch of games that we wanted to try to get to the table while I was there. It wasn't a hard and fast, we must get to these list, but it was more of an aspirational, we're geeking out, we're very excited to see each other, and this is what we have to look forward to list. And one of them they had played before and I hadn't. They had it in their collection that I was deeply looking forward to trying was Encyclopedia. And so that was the next one that we got to the table. Allison came over and we played it again. They taught me. And in this game, you are basically using dice as workers, and you're utilizing them to explore different areas, basically acquire different specimens to then study and then publish about. Those are kind of the major actions that you'll be using your dice for. Higher dice value can get you usually a better action or to research more at once, things like that. You also need certain dice value to publish certain types of research. And what was really nifty but difficult about this game is whenever you acquired a specimen, it basically fell into a bunch of different categories. Like it could be an omnivore, and where it lived or the weather and the climate that it liked would be different facets. And when you published, you basically picked a reference creature and all of its different attributes basically could be published. Think of it like a paper that this is the focus animal of, and they have a region they're from, and they have things they eat, and they have weather that they live in, and I can include in this paper anyone that kind of lives in the same climate, and I can talk about that climate loosely, and I can do anyone in the region, but this is the primary focus of the paper. And if it's from the same region, you basically can score and have them all for the end game together, and if they're not, you basically just use them as like kind of extra tidbits in the paper, and they get discarded. And acquiring these is very, very tight. There's only a certain number that you have each round, and so that dance in my head of which ones I wanted and which ones I was comfortably letting go and how many different categories I had to build up because there was an exponential system to score them all. It was kind of a lot my first game, I will say. This is actually one of 2 games we played twice while I was there, and the second time we played, I really, really enjoyed it. The first one, it just took me almost too much mental energy to be fully enjoyable, that one piece of it, because I kind of spread myself thin trying to study too many different things, and in the process I didn't score highly enough in any of them to kind of be effective. I didn't win the second time we played either, but I think it's a game that's really, really wonderful, but it does take a second for you to kind of get your head around that strategy bit of it. Otherwise, I think it's lovely. I think it was really thematic. I'm a fiend for like dice as workers, and in this one it was really cool because we all pulled out of the bag 4 each round, and you roll them, and they're different colors which correspond to different regions and actions that you can take. But then you actually get to assign your dice to different parts of your board with different bonuses, and other people can draft them from you on their turn, but you get the bonus if they do. And so you also play this game of kind of anticipating what other people need and kind of situating yourself optimally for what you need, kind of protecting those things because they don't want to give you a bonus, or otherwise situating them that you'll get something if they were to take these dice. Likewise, you're going to be looking around and figuring out how you can most optimally use other people's stuff to the most benefit of yourself while you're probably also still benefiting them. In games with worker placement and those kind of things, you often don't see that level of player interaction apart from which spot are you taking on the board, and there's still that there, but I liked this bit of it. I liked that dance of me having to do a little puzzle at the beginning of each round. It also means I'm less limited. I'm not limited just to my workers, but it's part of the game kind of sorting out what is most valuable to you and what you're willing to give and take in those situations. So all in all, really enjoyed Encyclopedia, one of those bigger, newer to me ones that was a part of the game. And I probably am going to add it to my own collection when I can, because it was really, really lovely. And I think it's growing on me more and more, and probably will continue to do so once it's on my own shelves. After Encyclopedia, though, we were not done with big, heavy games of the day. We basically took a little break and then broke out Brass Birmingham. And I don't think I've talked about this one much at all, but Brass Birmingham is one of my favorite games of all time. I like to think it has Peaky Blinder vibes because you're building up industry and it's kind of dark and brooding, but it doesn't. It's an economic game that does have a dark, brooding board that some people don't like because they think it's too dark to see. I think it's lovely, and it's a great economic game. You basically see yourself trying to build up in a canal era, and then all of that gets wiped away and you're building up in a rail era. And so you kind of have this dance of how can I quickly build up my economic wheelhouse now, knowing that this shift is going to happen and I'm going to have to kind of pivot. So you can do things to kind of give you immediacy and boost, but you can also give yourself wiggle room in order to grow into the next era of the game. The game has high strategy, area control, but it is so simple in gameplay. Really, you have a card, and on your turn, you'll play 2 actions, and that's discarding 2 cards. Sometimes you need a specific card to play at a specific location, but otherwise, a lot of the times for different actions, you can discard any of the cards from your hand. So you need to be a little mindful about what you're giving away. So for those particular actions, you have the ability to do them, but otherwise, you're just playing cards, taking actions, the deck will run out, and then we'll start a new era and do it again. And it just is such simple entry and simple rules with such high depth, and I love my little economic empire. I don't believe I won that one either. I think I won very few, but I stinking love it. There's my review is that it's one of my favorite of all time, and I was just so happy to play it at 4 players with such wonderful other players to compete against. It was a blast. And that really brought us to around dinner time, and we stopped for the day. We didn't play any other games because we went out that night. It was Saturday night, and they wanted to show me a little bit of Texas, so we got all dolled up in, well, I was in like a dress and cowgirl boots, and Mackenzie was in like shorts and that, and we went dancing. They took me two-stepping for the first time at a place called Cowboys Dance Hall, and it was wild. Just way more cowboys than I've ever seen in my life, but also just really cool. It was this huge place with tons of folks dancing, and I don't have any rhythm, but Mackenzie and Sebastian both kind of showed me how to dance, and a stranger took pity on me and was very patient with me as they were dancing with me. The power went out for like 30 minutes, and that was wild too, but it was a really nice and lovely night out of drinking and dancing, and we didn't play any other games that night, but that's okay because we had so many other days to do so, and so we were able to just spend Saturday night out and about and enjoying things, and it was really wonderful. I'm grateful for friends who will show me bits of their world, teach me a few new skills, though I would not say I'm skilled, but also I love things like dancing. When pre-COVID in DC, I used to go salsa dancing with my friend Andrew every Wednesday at a place that would always show you a couple of new intermediate steps, but always go over the basics with you. So someone who's like not a dancer, but oh so wants to be. It was like a perfect way for me to like grow and learn in that space. And so I was happy to kind of get a sense of that again, because it's been a really, really long time since I went out dancing. But of course, the next morning we were back to the table. The next morning, once we all kind of woke up, it was actually Mackenzie's birthday proper. And so we played Kohaku to start the day, which is this beautiful koi pond game where you basically draft features for your koi pond, like little rocks and statues and flowers, as well as koi. and is it just koi? Is it just koi? Koi fish? Do you have to say that? Can I say koi? I don't know. But you draft them together, and you basically build up with every other fish and feature around your board, and fish have different colors to them. Features score differently, especially corresponding with different colors and whether it's baby fish or not and things like that. And it's just so beautiful. They actually had a new edition of the game that I think lost a lot of its charm because the initial one was made with these acrylic tiles that kind of had like a watery depth to them. And Mackenzie has that one. And so when we were drafting them, it just looks so gorgeous on the table. And now they have, and what I actually have, is a cardboard edition, which is still beautiful, but it just doesn't have the same kind of charm in look and feel. And part of that was production issues with COVID, which is completely understandable. But that original edition that we got to play with was just so charming. We just drowned ourselves in coffee and woke up and played some Kohaku. Then we had birthday cake for breakfast, as we absolutely should. And Allison came over, and it was just, a wonderful start to what would continue to be an amazing game-filled day. Once Allison was there and birthday cake was inhaled, we sat down, just Allison, Mackenzie, and I, for Castles of Tuscany. And Mackenzie and I were actually talking about it while I was there, but there's something just really special about a game table full of women together. Maybe it's just because of the rarity in the industry, but I really love gaming with the gamer ladies that I know. I love gaming with my gaming guys too. I mostly game with gaming guys. But there's something that just felt really special and novel about that, to be able to share the hobby more than just some light fare games with a table of women was just a really nice start to the day. And we played Castles of Tuscany, which is a newer, modified version of Castles of Burgundy, which I would call a modern classic. I'm going to show you. I don't show all of them, but I'm going to show this one. This is Castles of Burgundy. So basically in Castles of Burgundy, you have a little duchy in front of you, and you roll dice to draft tiles off of like a shared pool of tiles that you can get and place them on your board. In Castles of Tuscany, it kind of streamlines and shortens that experience. So you don't have as big of a map anymore. You kind of have smaller interlocked tiles, and you're building up in largely the same way, but you're playing cards instead of using dice. So you have to have 2 cards that match the tile that you'd like to acquire in order to acquire it. And once you do so, time will tick on because you'll replace it with a tile out of your own stack. And once one full stack of A tiles is depleted off anyone's board, we'll do a first scoring. Then once the B tiles are gone, we'll do a second scoring, and then a final scoring after anyone's C tiles are gone. There's ripple effects and special abilities. Each tile you place will kind of trigger its own action ability. And so some of them do things like give you workers that let you modify how many cards you need of a given type, very akin to workers that you have in Castles of Burgundy. And so this was just like a cute little abbreviated Castles of Burgundy. I appreciate it as its own separate game and a good game if you want something a little more compact. I think I'm still partial to Castles of Burgundy, but also that's one that's like near and dear and old to me that I just consistently love. I think there's something about dice. I don't like dice for random movement. I don't always like dice for combat, or I don't like dice always as a source of randomness, I should say. But I kind of don't mind it when it's then workers and I have to modify what I do with them, and I have ways of doing so. I like kind of using dice as workers quite often, where I don't consider myself a dice gamer generally. So yes, so I really enjoyed Castles of Tuscany. That's when we played, but I would say it's a step down, though a reasonable thing to have in your collection as a Castles of Burgundy lover. But after a very chill morning of Kohaku and Castles of Tuscany, we really got the party started with another meaty one, which is Obsession. And this, again, was Mackenzie's birthday, and Mackenzie is the nicest soul in the entire world, so she picked a game that she knew that I could teach, that her husband had been dying to play and learn, so we played Obsession. She loved it too. They actually both played it yesterday, and I also played it yesterday. Obsession has actually been my online Obsession game. There's a really good adaptation of it on Board Game Arena that plays just so smoothly. The game itself is very smooth, but set up in person is a little more monstrous because there's a bunch of tiles to sort and whatnot, and everyone has to get their own little families. But essentially, the game is Obsession, Pride, Intrigue, and Prejudice in Victorian England, and you're all playing as a family that are trying to build up their reputation, and also with Bridgerton vibes, woo the Fairchild children, who can also boost your reputation, among other things. But essentially, they like certain stuff. You can go for those certain stuff. It can give you an extra boost and extra points at the end if you acquire them. But like many of other Euro games, you'll have side objectives that you'll whittle down throughout the game, and you're just trying to grow and thrive in Victorian England society. I love it. You basically, on your turn, will pick a tile that's like hosting an activity. Some things are just like out on the terrace admiring the view, and other things are like hosting afternoon tea, and you will pick them, and you have to provide not only the right service for them, but also have enough of the right gentry, whether that's ladies or gentlemen, to attend in order to make the activity happen. And all of them have their own prestige value, which is basically you have to get to a certain level of reputation before you can host it. Like, no one's coming to your tea until you sort that shit out. And it's just, I don't know, it's just such a charming little draft of things. There's a good amount of player interaction in terms of competition for the Fairchild's favor. But you're also kind of building your own little world and adjusting. There's a fair amount of randomness in the game, so if random, like, grinds your gears, maybe not for you. But I find it really charming, and especially after you've played it once and you kind of have the flow of the game down, you can really appreciate the charm of the game. There's some cringe moments, like when you can get extra prestige for your like daughter hanging out with like a prestigious old dude. You hope that it would be a prestigious, not old dude, but sometimes that's just how it works in the game. But overall, I just find it just kind of, it's a bigger game, but it has a light flow and feel. And what I think Mackenzie really enjoys in a lot of games is that you do have your own isolated world that people can't mess with. Yes, you're competing with things. People might draft the tiles you want, but you can really build your own little world without too much interaction and interplay in that. And so you have to manage your own household, and it is, I just love it. After Obsession, we did the next thing that Mackenzie really wanted to do for her birthday, which is we got takeout and we all curled up to watch The Last of Us. We had all been watching. The Last of Us is actually a game that I have played fully through. The first one emotionally broke me, and the second one gutted me all of the more. And so I've been really, really excited about the series that's come out on HBO, and thankfully they watched too, so I didn't have to like wait in anticipation until I got back to see the new episode or to sneak away from them. And so it was basically Sebastian in one corner, and then Mackenzie, Allison, and I just curled up like bawling during episode 3 ourselves. But we had a great time. And then afterwards, Allison scampered off again. And then Sebastian, Mackenzie, and I headed back upstairs to the game room to try out another one. This time they actually taught me a game as well. And they taught me Cooper Island, which I adored. So I don't actually have this one to show you, but I'll find some photos, do some magic, something. But basically, this is a game that I hadn't really heard of or seen much. But what Sebastian was telling me is it came out the same time as Maracaibo, which is highly praised, also a great game. And so it kind of slipped under the radar. But in Cooper Island, it's a little compact Euro, a good worker placement game. You can unlock more workers and different types of skill workers. But you're essentially building up your own little section of an island and trying to travel about with your different boats. And what's really cool is you actually build the island from the ground up with different resources. And so however high a tile stack is, whether that's mines or forests, is how much it produces. So if it's 4 high, it can make, and has a wood on it, it can produce 4 wood. And you can take them off at any time, but you have limited resource supplies, and if it's not from the island directly, it turns into 1 resource. So you're managing all these resources while trying to like overbuild yourself and place workers to basically achieve different goals, whether that's building things such as buildings themselves that will get you points, or building up different boats that generate income for you. And it all just flows together so nicely. I don't know why, but I like tactilely, it was just so satisfying. It was very much like, this is my world, and I even have my own section of the map, so player interaction wasn't immensely high, but I just really enjoyed it. It was only, I believe, 5 rounds, and oh no, it might have been less. It might have only been 4 rounds, and 2 to however many workers you unlocked actions around. So the game is quite compact. I'm butchering probably the rounds and number of workers that you have to start. But it was absolutely delightful. Again, one of those that I think I will add to my shelf after this, because I think with 2 people, with 3 people, and with 4 people, I think it's just kind of great. So after Cooper Island, we were incredibly pooped. I was very smitten with the game and knew that it was probably one that I wanted to get to the table again while I was there, because I just, you know, when you like initially inhale a Euro game and you're like, I want to do this again. But we were going to give it a break, and I knew in the morning that we wanted to tackle Kanban EV, which is one of the Lacerda games. Lacerda is notorious for his massive and heavy Euro games, and Kanban was one that I had played before, and they knew I could teach them. And so we set aside, we said, in the morning, that is what we will do. And so we crashed, and in the morning we woke up, and Mackenzie and I did a coffee game before Kanban. So I'll get to Kanban. But that was the plan, and to prep for Kanban, we played Calico. So my initial plan for these videos was to just do one video to capture all of my trip to San Antonio, but it turns out talking about 22 games fills a lot of time and space. So instead, I'm dividing it into 2 videos, so I will see you all next time for part 2 of my trip.